I'm going to start recording and just welcome everyone. Does anyone have any burning news or topics they want to share before we get started? Today we have a presentation from Mike Buza, and he's going to talk about something he's quite passionate about, and some of you are as well, I believe. So welcome, Mike.
Thank you.
I don't have an official introduction, but I hope you say a few words about yourself and
Sure, I got that covered actually,
great,
as part of my presentation. So,
great. Hopefully Peter will be back with us in a minute, but I'll let you take it over however you want to devote the first
okay, let
15.
me get my, oops, second here. I got to get that one right. Yeah, that one. Share. Okay. Oops. As I was saying, if you didn't hear me a little bit earlier, I'm going to apologize. A couple days ago, I spilled some juice on my keyboard, and so my keys are a little bit sticky. So if I have a little bit of a problem going through the presentation, I apologize in advance, and we'll do the best we can. I think it'll be okay, though. All right. As far as introduction, here's some quick thing. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this. I retired early, about 6 years ago, to get involved full time with environmental issues, primarily sustainable energy. But I've done some stuff with plastics, but that's kind of gone away recently. Um, I'm chair of the legislative committee for the Sierra Club. I've done a number of TV interviews. I write articles regularly, kind of zipping through these quick so we can get into the meat of the thing. I spoke probably at 100 township meetings having to do with siting, solar and wind siting over the years. I maintain a Facebook site, Michigan Sea, which stands for Sustainable Energy Advocacy. I was on the on a group called the Energy Production Distribution Transmission Work Group that provided research information for the Governor's Council on Climate Solutions. And my home is, I've had solar panels on my home for about 14 years. I've had them uh, actually, it's long enough ago where uh, when I put them on my house, I made the front page of the Flint Journal with pictures and everything. I mean, that was a big deal back then. 14 years ago doesn't seem that long ago, but in fact, Consumers Energy did not have an established policy at that time for putting rooftop solar. So there's a lot of negotiations that went on. My presentation today, I'm going to be talking about to spur some discussion. I'm going to talk about some of the what I find amazing aspects about global warming and some what I find shocking news of what's happened with some of these things. So, and hopefully, my idea is to kind of create a sense of urgency about dealing with this. I probably these you folks have that, but I think a lot of folks do not. So, um, one of the things global warming does, it does makes trees more vulnerable to drought, fire, pests. Food is less nutritious. I'm going to hit a lot of things on food as we go through here because I think that for me that's the most scary aspect of things happening with global warming. The food is going to be less nutritious, and also there's desertification. I mean, that is a big deal, especially in the United States. 40% of the United States is arid or semi-arid, which makes it vulnerable to this process. Um, and the most shocking of all, I read in a book called "Breaking Barriers" by John Rockstrom. He's a very famous climate scientist, and he says if we continue to go along this route, it's going to hit a point where agriculture will not be possible. This is a thing I seen in CNN just a couple days ago, and I found this shocking. They said that every day for the last year, the global ocean has hit a new heat record. And in the last year, it's increased by a quarter of a degree. And and this is Celsius, and there's the client scientists are warned us that we need to keep below 1.5 degrees air temperature, but the ocean temperature is going to reflect what's going on in the air. We're the other thing, last summer we had the Canadian wildfires that was going on, and I don't think people realize how big of area that burned. I mean, there was a number of fires, but if you combine them all together, and this is as of October, about 1.18%, about 1 point, uh, uh, about a land area bigger than 1.2 times bigger than the land area of Michigan. Now, I'm not talking water area because Michigan's territory goes into the Great Lakes. But if you just look at the land mass, the Canadian fires burned an area bigger than the state of Michigan, which that's just in Canada. We're not talking a lot of the other fires worldwide, and there's the same phenomenon that's happening in Canada's happening everywhere. Um, then there's the issue of zombie fires. These are fires that just really never go out. As you look, I put down the sources of all my information on the slides as I go through. I should have mentioned that earlier. Anyhow, zombie fires are fires that never really go out. In the wintertime, they get covered with snow, and it's usually kind of up in the Arctic that these are happening. I was shocked when I heard that the Arctic, there's large areas of the Arctic burning, but the snow covers them up, and they may be under 2, 3, 4 feet of snow, but when the snow melts in the springtime, these fires reemerge. It's just underneath the snow smoldering the whole time. Um, there's also spontaneous combustions going on. If you take a look at this gentleman standing on the side of this crater, you can see how big these are. And what's causing them is as the Arctic melts, it's releasing the methane in the tundra. And there's a couple theories of what's happening with this. Either a spark sets it off, or there is also the theory that just the expansion of the gas itself being trapped underneath it all of a sudden releases, and they have these explosions. And this isn't just one. There's several of these across primarily Siberia, but there's also happening up in Alaska. Ghost forest. Because of the rising ocean, we'll talk a little bit more about the rising ocean here in a bit. Because of the rising ocean, forest next to the shorelines of the ocean is starting to flood. And even if it doesn't flood, it's inundating the salt water's inundating the soil, and it's killing the trees. And in some areas, we're losing up to 15 feet of forest a year from the shoreline. And we're talking about using trees to help reverse global warming, but we're burning them up and we're losing them because of rising sea levels. We may have to come up with a different strategy. Um, this is a map, and I'm just going to go through it real quick. They're supposed to have a legend on the top, but I couldn't make it work. I'm not as talented with this stuff as I probably should be. The dark red areas is 10-degree warming of temperatures. The yellow areas is pretty much where it stays neutral. And there's some light blue areas down Lake in Florida you will see that those where actually temperatures are a little bit warmer than average. And the average temperature for the last winter. So it's in the area of Wisconsin, Minnesota, and those areas, the average temperature was 10 degrees over the 20th century average. Talk about what's happening in Michigan a little bit. Temperatures have increased in Michigan 2.3 degrees over pre-industrial times. And this is 2.3 degrees Fahrenheit. The higher spring temperature may be lengthening our growing season, but we're also starting to see more and more where the buds start coming out early and we have a late frost. Mother Nature returns back to her normal time, and so we've normal time for having frost. And so we've had a number of times recently where it's killed our fruit crops, and folks probably remember that. And this is happening more and more often. Extreme heat is a concern in some of the urban areas, around Detroit. We're also having a lot more increased amount of rains, where we get rains um, that's happening that's either 2 degrees or 2 inches or more of rain happens in a short period of time, an hour or two. And so it's creating flooding. Again, this is an issue around Detroit. Detroit does not have, and any urban areas in general, do not have the drainage system because of the increased surface areas, because of buildings and roads and that sort of thing. They do not have the infrastructure to drain this out quick enough. And because of that, we're getting in more and more flooding. I heard a lady talk the other day, says if you've ever had come close to having flooding in your area, you will have flooding in the future. And this is happening because the temperature is warming the oceans and other water, and we're getting more and more moisture in the air. So when it does come out, it comes out in great amounts. And California is struggling with this big time. They're having 3, 4, 5, 6 inches of rain in an hour in some areas from time to time. Future droughts are expected to increase because of rising temperature. And as we've seen this summer, Great Lakes hardly froze at all. And this leaves the shorelines vulnerable to flooding. Also, we're going to have increased algae blooms. You know, it's well known about the algae blooms, and we've been hearing a lot in the news in Lake Erie, but we also have that problem in Saginaw Bay, and they're even starting to have some in Lake Superior from time to time, and these are starting to increase more and more. They're small ones, but in Superior, but you know, I always thought Lake Superior was so cold, and I can remember going there as a kid that it's hard for me to imagine now as an adult that happening, but it is happening in small pockets now. Um, the other thing is, we're hearing a lot of propaganda about natural gas being clean burning fuel, but that's not the issue with it being clean. Natural gas, in many ways, is just as bad as burning coal, at least as far as the global warming goes. It's 80 times more powerful of greenhouse gas uh, than than uh, than a carbon is, and there's lots of leaks that goes on. I mean, there's our stoves, and you probably hear everyone screaming that you're not going to take my stove away, but we have alternatives to that. Induction stoves work just as well as gas stoves. In fact, even better. And the leaks we have, we're having. I'm just going to cover some of the real serious leaks that we've had. The Permian Basin, where the United States gets a lot of its natural gas. It's kind of in the Oklahoma, New Mexico, a little bit of Texas area. Those wells leak enough gas to heat 200 homes in a year. Um, the Nordstrom, that is a pipeline that went between Russia and Germany, and mysteriously it blew up at the beginning of the Ukrainian war. The Russians blamed the U.S., the U.S. blamed the Russians, but that leaked 500,000 metric tons of methane before they finally stopped the flow. Aliso Canyon, um, we store uh, during the summertime, we store a lot of our natural gas. Michigan does this too, and natural caverns underneath the ground. And the one in Liso Canyon, which is out in California, started where they were storing that in the summertime for use in the winter started leaking, and they could not recap it, and it leaked for about 6 months. And during that time, it at least leaked out 97,000 tons of carbon into the atmosphere. Um, and here's some of the reasons why this is a problem. Uh, we need to keep pre-industrial times, according to NOAA, we had about 280 parts per million of carbon in the atmosphere. James Hansen, who was the scientist that testified in front of Congress about the global warming phenomena back in the late 80s, said that we need to keep our uh, atmospheric concentration of carbon below 350 parts per million if we're going to avoid the worst of climate change. Right now, according to NASA, and this is of March of this year, we're at 426. I also put down what we had last year, which is about 420 parts per million, and kind of shows how we're uh, increasing every year. And this seems to be accelerating, unfortunately, at this point, instead of decreasing. We still have not seemed to have hit the peak. According to Dr. Bill McGuire, a climate scientist, if you add in the effects of methane, we're not at 426. We're more closer to about 500, and that information is a little bit dated. Probably is closer to about 510 parts per million. Temperature, excuse me, temperature increase to this point is according to NOAA is about 1.3 per 1.36 Celsius degrees Celsius, and we're supposed to keep below 1.5 to keep the worst of the climate change effects. So we're way too close for comfort in that area. Uh, Weather-related crop damage, and like I said, I'm going to hit this early because this is scariest for me about losing food. Um, According to the Department of Agriculture, the claims for against crop insurance have been increasing dramatically. In fact, the budget for that is generally being uh, we're spending more money on crop or paying out more money on crop insurance than we are actually taking in. So that's getting to be a more of a area of concern. I'm going to jump by that one because I want to leave some time for talking. Uh, Harvard School for Public Health says that that the fossil fuel burning of fossil fuel is accountable for about 1 in 10 deaths worldwide, including newborn infants. Air pollution counts for about 20% of their deaths worldwide. More CO2 triggers more pollen production and allergies. So people are, and generally, it also just generally pneumatic or about lung diseases in general is having problems. Um, and we talked about this food shortage. This is an interesting thing. This is the money put out just by the Koch brothers for disinformation about global warming, about the effects of oil and that stuff. Here's the most interesting one I find down here is the Mackinac Center. They receive tons of money from the Koch brothers to spread disinformation. This is my final slide. Basically, how does global warming affect Earth's functions? It's starting to affect the gravitational signature. There's tons of ice in the Arctic and the North and South poles. The This has, and there's many miles thick of this ice, and it's melting quickly. Gravity is a function of one mass attracting to another. So if you have large amounts of ice, which creates a huge mass at the poles as it melts, it's starting to affect the gravitational signature. Um, this affects a number of things. I mean, it's not only adding water to the ocean, which is increasing sea level rise. But because of the gravitational signature the gravity is stronger at the poles, as that ice melts, it decreases the gravity and increases the ocean rise in other areas because the ocean is being pulled towards the poles. It also, because of the weight of the ice at the poles, it's changing tectonic plates, and we're get more earthquakes and volcano eruptions. Anyhow, so what are we going to do with all of this? That's, I guess, where we're going to go with our discussion. I would like to see news sources broadcast this more often. I watch the news and do not see it as near as often as I would like to see it. Maybe letters to the editors, things that we could do. I do this type of speaking fairly often. In fact, I got uh, four, four speaking engagements for next month. I think we need to do more of that. Maybe a social media campaign, talk to friends and neighbors. I guess it's up to you from here on. I like to hear some other people's opinions, thoughts on this whole issue.
I don't know if you can hear me,
You can unmute
Yes.
yourself at the
but
bottom.
you mentioned just briefly the effect of warming on permafrost.
Yes.
There's also an equally horrific possibility from warming up the clathrates in the continental shelf. Do you know about does that word clathrate familiar to you?
That is not. Tell me about it.
Clathrates are a molecular structure that includes a sort of box made of ice, and inside the box it's methane. And as the ocean temperatures are warming, the immense tap of methane in the continental shelves, which is currently held in these icy underwater structures called clathrates, is starting to break down. And so there are areas of the Arctic where it looks like the ocean is just boiling from the release of methane from these continental shelf clathrates. Same with permafrost. There's
Yeah,
something
I
like
seen a
three,
picture where up in the Arctic Ocean that large amount of methane is being released, and it's probably from that phenomena that you're talking about.
right. And we're talking about gigatons of carbon here, which is extraordinarily huge.
Yes.
Other
So,
comments,
any
suggestions?
suggestions on what to do about this whole mess? I mean, how can we kind of move things along more quickly? I know this is a small group, but hopefully there's other small groups doing the same thing and we can have a larger effect. So,
I think one thing that's hopeful, but is that there's a number of things that should be done now that actually have benefits, immediate benefits. Solar and wind is cheapest new power source. Price of batteries are coming down. If you eat less beef, you're going to be healthier. Induction cooking has a number of advantages. EVs have a number of advantages. There's some issues with the charging. So there's some things that actually can be promoted, even if people don't even believe in climate change. But not enough is happening quick enough, which is the big issue, right? We're headed in the right direction, but it's certainly not quick enough. And I don't know how to deal with that because, part of the problem is that very few people that I run into want to deal with anything that's long range. Everything's short term. What's going to happen this year, next year. The media certainly focuses all on short term, and then we're all in different media silos, and so it's really hard to reach the people that we need to reach to kind of talk to them about these issues, and they don't want to hear it anyway. And so, I mean, I don't. There's a lot of things that we can kind of push our first solarized meeting is April 1st at the Township Hall. But it's a quandary as I talk to other people, I mean, I hear, well, when's that going to happen? Is it, they don't care unless it's going to happen like tomorrow. So it's a challenge.
What other ideas do people have? I don't want you to have to defend yourself here, Mike.
Oh, no.
But no, yeah. What other thoughts? What are people doing? What are they excited about? General comments about Mike's presentation. Sam, go ahead and unmute yourself.
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Leroy. Oh boy, Mike. What a great bunch of information that so many people are missing out on. And I don't know, like John said, I don't know what the answers are, how to light a fire under this issue. Because when you talk to the general public, I mean, well, who's the general public? There's such a wide diversity of, range of peak thoughts and ideas out there, but at least half or more are still naysayers on this thing. It's at least what I see on social media. So there's so many people that just come out so in a belligerent way that says this is all a scam, and how to get to them, I'm clueless. But I mean, I just, I know a lot of you guys know, I just finished this book, which I have to tell you, I just learned yesterday is the printing has been delayed for, I don't know all the details, but it was supposed to come out like 2 days ago, and it's going to be the middle of April or so, but which isn't that far away, but I don't know what all the snags are, but so it's coming out in April, and so much of it, what's in there, Mike, is what you just talked about in a kind of I mean, the intent was to not be overly technical, but to kind of identify with everybody based on our own lives, our childhood memories, and kind of make friends with people about the environment and how everybody basically feels about it, as they grew up, and then dish out little snippets of a lot of what you just said, like this whole thing with these zombie fires that's talked about in there. And I mean, those are peat bogs, right? I mean, that's what these things that are smoldering. And they
Yes.
go on and
Bogs,
on and
yes.
on. They'll just burn forever until the peat's completely oxidized and gone. So, and when this starts to happen, it's this whole acceleration thing, which is talked about in the book too. It's we've been doing this for 200 years, releasing CO2 in the air, which is invisible. So that compounds the problem. Nobody sees it. They can deal with issues they can see, but this is an invisible problem. But so now it's increasing at a faster and faster rate, and then we start to have these things like peat bogs go on fire, and then that compounds more CO2 into the air. And at the same time, we're cutting down all the trees and filling all the wetlands. So we're taking away all the carbon sinks. So we're just turning this whole thing upside down. And how to turn it around, I wish I had an answer for you. I don't know what to do about it. It's driving me nuts, to tell you the truth. But if we could come up with a way to let people know, geez, oh Pete, somehow we got to figure that out.
Let me throw a little hope in there. I mean, right now, and I can't remember the exact figure, so I'm going to kind of make them up a little bit, but about a third of the people are very concerned about climate change. Another third of them are kind of aware of it, but they haven't hit the panic button yet. And third, people are absolute deniers, and like you say, they get very obnoxious when you even bring anything up about it. And I think we just need to shift this a little bit. you know, if we can start getting the third that are concerned about it to actually take some action on it, and actually do something about it, I think that then maybe the other third maybe start shifting them so they're at the more concerned area. But you know, I spend, you know, when there's a thing like, oh, nice weather out today. Well, yeah, it's February and 70 degrees. Something's not right. You know, even clerks at the thing, and people are starting to recognize that. And I have conversation, you know, short conversations with even clerks, and you know, amazing number of them are say, yeah, this is global warming, and we do have some things coming out that we need to do quicker. The IRA is going to have some things coming out. Uh, you know, right now we can get deductions on energy efficient things, appliances, insulating our house, rooftop solar, and all that other stuff, and deducted on our taxes. Michigan has to do their part, and when they do their part, there's going to be some deduction on appliances at point of sale, so that when people buy an energy efficient stove or an electric stove in general, they will get the deduction immediately instead of having to wait for their taxes. And so, you know, and the deductions for low income people is up to $840 for like a stove. So you can get a brand new, you know, electric stove instead of gas, uh, you know, right off the bat. So there is things coming down the thing. You know, the IRA does not go far enough, but I think we need to take advantage of what we have now and keep pushing for it to go. And I would like to see even mainstream media. You're right, everybody's in their own silos. But if we can get some of the ABC, CBS, and that sort of thing, and Washington Post and some of the major publications talking about this more often, and tie in some of these heavy rains with global warming. This is the result of global warming. These fires that's happening, you know, is being aggravated by global warming. So, I mean, that's my 2 cents.
I gotta second that, what you just said with the media too, and I think John brought it up. But I'm hearing more and more mentioning of climate change in the news, but they don't correlate it with anything. They just say, you know, it might be on the weather station. Well, it's, you know, global warming, but they don't talk about all the other issues that are happening with it. There's no comprehensive info about it. It's just these sound bites that don't do it. People just it goes right past them. They don't know it. They don't get it. So we got to fix that.
I think Ned has a
So
comment.
I wanna just recount an anecdote. John and Leroy will remember this. We had somebody come to the Environmental Commission meeting at one point, and this person wanted to promote environmental sensitivity and so forth, and was feeling that, you know, maybe we should have sort of the equivalent of Boy Scout badges or something like that for, you know, being a good recycler and things like that. And so I just said, well, part of the way that you have to, what you have to do to be an advocate is to have, you know, the equivalent of the elevator speech, right? You have to have a relatively quick piece of information. And as a chemist, one of the things that I always teach in my classes, I go through the calculation of what 1 tank of gasoline turns into when you burn it. So, you know, a tank of gasoline in a modest sized car is maybe 100 pounds of gasoline. That turns into 300 pounds of CO2. And so you say, look, wow, 300 pounds is the mass of the load of passengers. Well, typical, you know, 2 passengers in 1 tank of gas. Yeah, and then you can go through the calculation. Well, it's somewhere between, you know, for a small car, it's basically a pound of CO2 per mile. And this person's reaction immediately was, oh no, you can't take away my Tahoe. Literally, those were the words. And so there's the sort of feel good, like, you know, we got to do something about this stuff. And then there's, how do you literally alter the culture itself, especially in Michigan, the state of the automobile, without, you know, I mean, I'm not arguing that people should, in some literal way, take away people's cars, but you know, we've gone from modest sized sedans when I was a kid to everybody driving SUVs now. as just the norm. And so if you have a gathering of say 50 people who have each come, 5 or 10 miles, you can add that up immediately, and you've got many, many tons of CO2 that have been emitted just to get those people together. Then the other thing about methane that's a problem is that unlike CO2 has, natural biological processes that pull it out of the atmosphere. As far as I know, there aren't significant organisms that pull methane out of the atmosphere to, use it as a building block and so forth. Its lifetime in the atmosphere compared to a carbon dioxide molecule is much shorter, but it's still long. And it's, as Mike pointed out, its greenhouse gas effect is so much larger just because of the details of the molecular structure. So the concern about catastrophic releases, like Peter was talking about, is huge. It's just overwhelming. I come from Massachusetts, and so when I teach my classes, I can actually, as a personal witness, I can say that there are ocean levels that I grew up with that are clearly a foot higher now than they were when I was a kid. That's my own personal observation. It's not a matter of, of hearsay or something like that. And sea level rise is that's going to inundate lots of things. And the funny thing is that some of the states that are the most sort of rebellious about acknowledging these issues are the ones that are going to be the most affected, Florida, Alabama, etc. But anyway.
I think Kim had her hand up. Is that still true, Kim? You're muted if you're speaking. Go ahead.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I missed the question.
I just wondered, you thought you had your hand up. And
I did, but I lost my train of thought.
Hey, Mike, you mentioned in the slides that food is going to become less nutritious. Can you explain that? I haven't heard that before.
Yes, what happens with the increase the exact biological mechanism, but basically there's more fiber in the food. It becomes more fibrous, and what happens is it uses a lot of its thing to it's and I don't know how to exactly express this. It uses more of its chemicals to protect itself, and also it becomes more fibrous. So that way it becomes less nutritious. I don't know the exact mechanism behind it, and I just remember that information came from the United Nations, so it's a reliable source, but I don't know the exact chemical or biological mechanism behind it.
Hey, thanks.
Sarah, you're up, I guess, next.
So I just wanted to make a comment about when Ned, you were talking about the gas from the cars and stuff. We are on our second Prius and absolutely love it. And I have had conversations with a particular person who will constantly tell me, well, my Tahoe, he has something like a Tahoe. It's a really big SUV. And his comment will be, well, it takes more energy or something to build your Prius. And that's always the justification to me for why his humongous truck and humongous SUV are better than my Prius. And I'm just, it's like, I don't even know where to go with that, except that I'm like, well, a new car has to be made in some way, but my Prius that we keep for, the first one we had for 9 years, and then this one we've had for, I don't know, 6 years or whatever. I just sit in the space of like, I'm fine with that. I like the fact that we are using less gas. So anyway, I guess I'm stating that as a comment for what is given for justifying why, well, I want my big, huge SUV and big, huge truck, even though I don't haul anything. and, compared to my Prius, so.
I think sometimes you got to look at the bigger picture to justify that. I don't think your Prius, just because of the size of it, it uses more energy to make, but over the lifetime of it, I'm sure it saves a lot more. And some of the things are that way. It takes a little bit more to make it up front, but over the lifetime, it saves a lot of energy. And the other point is, as we become more of a green society and things become more electrified, that's going to start reversing itself. So,
Roberta?
Yeah, thanks for the presentation, Mike. I'm, it's hard not to be paralyzed from being overwhelmed. But I have a little bit different question, and either you or someone, I keep hearing advertisements, and in my frame of thinking, it's baloney. I would use a stronger word, but no. Talking about offsets, when people say, oh, well, if you use this credit card, your purchase will be offset. The carbon will be offset in some way, which in my mind, I'm just like, that sounds like about, like I'm being sold a bill of goods. Like, I feel like we've been sold a bill of goods about recycling plastic, and I just wonder, does anybody know what that whole scheme, what that whole shtick is with offsets when they say, we're going to offset your purchase? They don't say anything more.
Yeah, it's generally known as greenwashing, Roberta, where they're
Well,
just
and
trying to fool people into thinking that they're actually doing something when they're not.
exactly. But is anything being done, or is it just an advertising slogan?
It's probably a broad range of things that are being done, and there's no one company doing one specific thing. I think that is a great question. What are the ways that people are offsetting?
Yeah,
And
how can we?
justifying them? I think a lot of it is tree planting, but yeah, it's a good question.
they plant trees, but how much, maybe, 50 years later, they harvest them. So, you're not really going anywhere.
I think though, before we poo-poo new ideas, I mean, yeah, sure, anything new is going to be a little clunky at first, but maybe this is an area that offers some potential that, before we brown wash it, let's look at it. I mean, we just had the sustainable fashion show over the weekend, and clothing is something that affects us all. I mean, we're all dressed today. But there's so many different dimensions. There's no right answer, but the fact that people are excited about maybe clothing choices or wearing their clothes longer, or oh, by the way, Brian was on the runway modeling upcycled clothing and vintage and thrifted. I'll share pictures at 11. No, but I'm just saying there's multi dimensions to this, and I think no, there's not one answer. It's going to come in many forms, and if we're too focused on the problem all the time, we're going to miss some of these answers that might be really fruitful. I'm
I
taking
think the
more
main
than my
thing we
time.
have
Go
to do
ahead.
is reduce carbon out of the air as quick as possible and electrify it. I think that's the main solution that's going to get us somewhere.
Kim?
Yeah, more of a comment than a question, but
Kim, I apologize. I meant to lower your hand and I muted you. Can you start that again?
I'm sure it was an accident, right, Leroy?
I'd like you to think so.
Yeah, sure. Okay. More of a comment than a question, but with regard to people that deny climate change or just aren't interested in doing anything about it. You can't convince them by alarming them with data and statistics. The only way that you're going to bring them over to caring about it is if somehow you can show that there is mostly a financial benefit to them, like with farmers and cover crops and things like that. If you can show that a field that is maintained, through regenerative agriculture is more productive and less costly than a field that is maintained through, the use of pesticides and herbicides and everything and fertilizers, you might be able to convince some of them but it's a very slow process. And I think in terms of, other industries, it's going to be very similar.
I think good points. Brian, I think you're up next.
Okay, hope you can hear me. Okay. What was it? Could you bring back up that slide about that had the Mackinac public policy or whatever? I realize this is a random request here.
The Coke Empire.
Yeah, so essentially just calling back to what that is. It's that's basically what it's all like, what's up against. There's a huge kind of I want to say there's a large number of there's a lot of money against things that everything that we need to do. Like if there's people like ourselves that want to actually improve things for the better, there's people literally making money off destroying the planet, basically. Long story short. So unless that's really taken care of, it's not going to make as much of a difference. So the best, going back to the question kind of at the beginning, I guess, the Q&A, best way to probably make a difference is at the local level, like many of us are already doing. And then to do some kind of, and then to get more and more people involved as well, but then also to just do some like targeted action, that kind of thing. I think it's something like if only 1% of the population can push for change, then that, that's really what's gonna do it. I think that's about what it took for the Civil Rights Act, and yeah, hopefully making sense.
Thank you, Ryan. John?
Related to this topic, I recently had a couple conversations that I guess are relevant. I was visiting with a friend, and he's very highly educated and does believe in climate change. But he mentioned that he thinks, people are panicking. They shouldn't panic so much. And he mentioned, we really need to use natural gas more. And so I had kind of mentioned about the methane leaks, and it was new information to him. As well educated as he was, he hadn't heard about the fact, and this has been kind of pretty widely known now for quite a while, that you got all these methane leaks. So natural gas power plants can be as bad as coal power plants when you kind of look at the whole system. And then I had a conversation with a neighbor about the EVs, and he was actually interested. He, just put in a solar system, had put in an EV charger, and I was talking to him about going back east. And what I thought was interesting, I said, "Oh yeah, you got to stop, occasionally, charge up and stuff." And he said, "I can't do that." He says, "I get in my car and I got to just go to the place." And I'm thinking, boy, I talk about being rigid, but people are like that, right? I mean, they're used to doing things a certain way, and they certainly don't want to change. Yeah, so that is discouraging, to say the least.
Bruce?
I read recently or saw recently a a satellite that has just been put up or is about to be put up with, I think it uses infrared technology as a methane leak detector. It'll be able to show those leaks wherever they are without having to trespass on private property, oil fields and that sort of thing. And that's a good thing, I think. Also, just another comment. I have two daughters that are in their 20s, and both of them are pretty concerned about the way the environment is heading, also political climate. And they, both of them have made the decision that they are not going to have any children. They've decided that they're not going to bring any more people into this world because they're afraid of what it's going to be like in 20 years, 30 years.
I'd say most people under 55 are either are concerned or very concerned about everything that's going on. We're pretty aware of it, to be honest.
Yeah.
Can I just offer a little a wisp of hope? There's a, you know, it is so overwhelming. The scale of the problem is so overwhelming, and that, you know, that's both an argument against doing anything. You know, a lot of people, their reaction is just the atmosphere is so big and I am so small. How could I make a difference? But you know, in fact, how can humanity make a difference to the atmosphere? So they sort of don't believe that the atmosphere is changing in the first place. That was part of the argument. Anyway, the story of the ozone layer is, in fact, a really interesting one, because if you track what happened when people began to understand what happened with the ozone layer and actually reversed the production of the chlorofluorocarbons that were destroying ozone, the ozone layer is recovering. I mean, in other words, we as humanity have made a choice that actually reverses the effect that we were having on the global atmosphere. Now, unfortunately, that's a much smaller problem in a sense than you know, refrigeration and things like that can be run different ways. We're pretty addicted to energy, and it's a little harder to just let go of our energy usage habits. But my point is just that it is possible for humanity to make decisions that have a global impact in a positive sense.
Kim?
Yeah, I was, oh my God, I am such an airhead today. Been on medication for this stupid sinus infection. With regard to vehicles, I think until the US beefs up their electrical grid, that rather than going all in promoting only electric vehicles, I think it would be a much better play at this point to promote hybrids that can run on either electric or gas, simply because we don't have the electrical grid to support everybody going electric at this time.
You remind me of another idea that is intriguing. This just popped in my head about technologies or ideas that are revolutionary or catalytic. You know, there's small changes, and then there's probably lots of examples of inventions that have really changed society. And I can't help but think that we're on the verge of a few of those. And will we recognize them when they come? I'm not sure. I'll just throw that out there.
Yeah, we just, we've got to have the infrastructure to support it before we go, full steam ahead on some of the newer technologies. So that's just a concern of mine.
What if we develop a whole new type of infrastructure like, wireless transfer of energy. Anyway, Mike, go ahead.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, I mean, a lot of the things that needs to be done has to be done like immediately. Uh, you know, Kim talked about the electrical grid, and we're behind on that. Even if we throw up, everyone starts doing rooftop solar and that sort of thing, we're still going to need to enhance the grid somehow. And that's you know, and the consequences are so dire. I've kind of come to the conclusion that we really need to lead our life differently. We talked a few years ago about staycations, and maybe we do some of that instead of burning energy. I've gone to and I've gone to hand washing dishes, just so we're not using an electric dishwasher, because those things run forever. I took the draw on those on mine, and it does draw a fair amount of electricity, and it's running for a long time. And on top of that, in the summertime, it's discharging hot water or hot air into your home on the dry cycle. And there's a lot of other things like that. So, I think we do not have the time to make some of the changes, and we're going to have to do some, if you will, personal sacrifices. And I think there's going to be a lot of people. I mean, they mock you when you say to eat less meat. Oh, I'm going to eat my meat, and that sort of thing. But hopefully, there's enough people around to start doing some personal changes that and reducing their things, so that can buy us at least enough time so we can do some of the structural changes.
We have about 3 more minutes. Any parting comments? I just want to say thank you, Mike, for joining us, and you've obviously hit a nerve. Any other comments or things that people want to share?
From a transportation point of view, I think it would be really, the more we can welcome people who want to use things like bicycles and public transportation. Another point about U.S. culture is that most people perceive public transportation as the thing the poor people use, but we actually, I grew up in Boston, and in Boston, in the big cities like New York, Boston, Chicago, it's just part of everybody's day-to-day commute, and it's so much less impactful in terms of carbon dioxide per traveled mile. I just wish we could get the culture to accept it more. I mean, even the Lansing area, CATA is not a bad system. It's kind of dilute out in Okemos and Hazlitt, but it's not bad. And it has bicycle racks on the front, so you can sort of use multi-mode. These things work pretty well, actually. Anyway, that's the kind of thing I wish we could encourage in the culture.
One of the kind of adjacent to that, I saw a documentary a couple of weeks ago about the construction of original construction of 496 through the kind of the middle of Lansing. And what it did, not only by destroying, the folks that lived in that corridor, but it enabled white flight out of the cities, because you were able to live farther away and get downtown quicker. It eliminated walkable downtown areas. So it was not only the demise of the local neighborhoods, it also affected the overall health of the downtown area, because you didn't have people living in walking places and things like that. And, when you think about it, especially here in Michigan, because we're so auto industry focused, the way they ran the expressways through major cities just really decimated them. And I think a lot of I think had that not happened, that we would possibly have had a more robust public transit system. But, that's just a thought.
Thank you,
I
Kim.
think we can reverse that. Just one final quick thought here, if I might. I used to work for mental health, and the people that came to our public mental health, so a lot of the people were on Social Security, bare minimum Social Security, basically very low income. And one of our psychiatrists used to ride to work on the bus with, of course, a lot of the clients, which endeared him to the clients greatly. Provided a good example, and other people started following his example. So I think an example can start leading people. I know that I've had solar on my house, and I have talked to a number of people after conversations with them, have decided to make that investment. And it is an investment. I mean, I haven't paid for electricity and I can't remember how long. So anyhow, I think we as individuals can have a large influence, and I think that can have a domino effect, because I'm sure some of those people that I talked into getting the solar have talked other people into doing so.
That's a good positive note to end on. But I do want to mention that Ryan is going to be speaking next week. Ryan teaches GIS at Lansing Community College, and he's going to share some environmental uses of GIS. So it should be an interesting geographic information systems. Should be an interesting conversation. Hope to see some of you next week. And thank you so much, Mike. Everybody have a great week.
Thanks a lot. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Thanks.